My name is Joel Solomon. I'm the co-author of The Clean Money Revolution, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. I'm also the co-founder and chair of Renewal Funds Company, a mission venture capital investment firm. Today, I'm going to be on Dov Baron's show and talk with you about the Clean Money Revolution and about your legacy and how we can make a better world together.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Welcome to another episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to look at, can you be profitable and actually do good at the same time? It's a good question, and we're going to get it answered on today's show. If you're a new listener, strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for being part of the show and for sharing the show with everybody you know. You are the one who made us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And of course, we're very grateful to Inc.com for making us the #1 podcast to listen to make you a better leader. So let's dive right into it. As a leader, whether you are a leader in the corporate sense, whether you're an entrepreneur, sales leader, or a leader in any capacity, you know that today there's something more than just making money, and you will discover that if you've been hiring millennials that they want to make sure that they're doing meaningful work. Well, what does that mean? Well, very often what that means is that they're working for a company who is contributing to a community in some other form. But is it possible to do that and make profit and at the same time make a big positive difference? Well, today we're about to find out, because my guest today is none other than
Joel Solomon.
Joel Solomon. He is the author of Clean Money Revolution, the Clean Money Revolution, and we're going to be talking about reinventing power, purpose, and capitalism. Thank you for joining us, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And I want to jump in because, you know, this idea of making money and making a difference, I want to start by asking you a personal question. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Because this seems to be a nice idea. Mm-hmm. I know it's not, but it seems to be a nice idea. And one of the sort of other end questions can be something like, well, it's easy for you to say because you're rich, right? So is that your natural state? First of all, would a person in the street consider you wealthy?
I'd say I'm very comfortably affluent.
Right.
In these days, the level of wealth that's happening makes me very, very dwarf. But but
Sure.
I've got enough money.
Right.
I've got enough money.
Now, is that where you came from?
Well, the roots started a little tougher than that. Jewish immigrants from Poland, Russia, and Germany got to the USA and worked their way up. My father started making money during my teenage years is when it really came together. He was a shopping mall developer. First, they'd been in the movie theater business. They had one of the first television licenses in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They didn't think it would work and they sold it. But the shopping malls did work. So I began to inherit small amounts of money in my late teens and early 20s, and then my father passed when I was in my 30s, and then I inherited a few $1 million.
So, you know, as you were early 30s.
Yes.
You've got plenty of dough.
Yes.
You know,
Enough.
in the world at that time.
Yes.
Is the thought, oh, I want to go out and do good?
Well, I did start early because I also had a mother who was iconoclastic and a bit of a rebel. She is an artistic photographer, and she never quite fully bought into the corporate model. Mm-hmm. Traveled around the world photographing people in all classes and all types of life. So I had an interesting combination of the driven capitalist and the questioner. who went deeper. So in the 60s happened.
Sure.
I got exposed to the push for social justice and social change and stop the war and these kinds of things. So it was a turbulent time and a time of asking a lot of questions, challenging things. My first Canadian influence was Joni Mitchell saying they paved paradise, put up a parking lot. And I thought about those shopping malls, and it was, a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe your dad had paved paradise and put up a shopping mall.
That's right. So I did come in an era of questioning, and I think that by the time I inherited money, which another decade or so later, I was convinced that money could be used as a positive force in the world, money, finance, and business. And I got exposed early on to, I guess, what I would call pioneers and the godparents of these concepts, which is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I joined a couple of organizations that got me exposed to Patagonia, Body Shop, Ben & Jerry's, Stonyfield Yogurt, and a lot of people that just out of sheer cussedness were determined that they were going to use their businesses to make a positive impact in the world. So I got to learn at the knees of those folks. And these organizations grew along pretty obscure. But by the time I got that bit of inheritance, I was convinced that there was a way to do it, and that it actually was low-hanging fruit that other people weren't aware of as a business opportunity. So we started a real estate company in Nashville, Tennessee, and the first modern coffee business that made it there. And both of these companies
This is a sort of a pre-Starbucks thing, or?
Starbucks already existed, but it hadn't come to the South yet.
Right.
So we did things like voter registration at our coffee places. We did all kinds of interesting, of course, employment things. We held a lot of charitable fundraisers. We did a lot of promotion by doing good in the neighborhood and in the community. The real estate company, when my friend and I started it, first thing was, everyone had gone to the suburbs.
Right.
We felt urban sprawl, environmental issues, the kind of demolition of neighborhoods and communities in the inner city, that actually historic preservation, all kinds of issues would be served by focusing on the old neighborhoods and staying close to the city. We were about the only ones that did that. Everyone else was in the suburbs.
And what city is this in?
Nashville, Tennessee. So over time, the trends about urbanization and moving, we're sitting here in the urban
Very
life,
urban, yeah.
right? We walk out, we've got everything we want. We don't need as much space necessarily, those kinds of things. But that was early there.
Right.
So what happened is we were lifted by a tide. And we also got into small scale development. People wanted to be back in the city. But also with the company, I'd seen Ben & Jerry do 1% for environmental issues and other causes out of their profits. And I said to my partner, Mark Deutschman, 1% is good, but they could change their minds, or the company could get sold, and what happens to it? So we decided to donate 5% of the ownership of the company, put it into a charity.
5% of the ownership.
The ownership.
So that's different than profit.
That's right.
So if Charlie comes along and purchases your organization, 5% is still owned by...
That money goes to the charitable side.
Wow.
From the purchase. So we've given away, we're pushing on the third million now.
Beautiful.
We use the company to drive, in Nashville they're called greenways, which are paved bike and walking trails. We work on politics in our neighborhoods. We push progressive issues in the city. My partner now is an important player in the Urban Land Institute, greenways, and in influencing the future of transportation issues in Nashville. And it's become a force where our several hundred agents also donate into the Village Fund. The company's called Village Real Estate, and they're all very proud of it. And that puts us in connection with not-for-profits and good deeds all across the community. We also make good money.
Sure.
We preach an ethic to our agents of how much is enough. When you've got enough, what are you going to do to give back to the community? You've been very blessed to be able to make money doing this.
So I want to go to that because, like I said, the book is The Clean Money Revolution, right? So the Clean Money Revolution, in and of itself, I mean, if you just look at the title suggests, therefore, that money is dirty. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, it seems to me like we're in a polarity. And on one side, you've got immense greed and, quite literally dirty, meaning coal mining and all kinds of things like that. And this hunger, greed for money, and with it the esteem, the status that comes from
That's
it.
right.
We started off by saying, when I said, and I asked you a very personal question about your own wealth, and you said, compared to some of those, like you're fractional.
That's right.
Because there are people in the 0.1%, it used to be the 1%, now it's the 0.1%, who are stratospherically wealthy.
That's right.
And I think that that's created a mindset that money is, and the polarity is that money is dirty, because the ones with all that money don't give a shit about anybody else. So is that what drove the title?
Money is not necessarily dirty. Money is a neutral substance.
Of course.
It comes from extraction from the planet or from human labor, and it's how we do it and what we do that matters. So my premise, first of all, you'll see in this book that I'm not really a finger wagger. I'm not out to condemn anybody. I want to raise questions and challenge our assumptions.
Fabulous.
So Clean Money was a tough title for me. The publisher and some others really pushed me on it. But I said, well, what about Cleaner Money? Well, that didn't make sense, for book selling. So Clean Money was a good stark stimulus for raising conversations. Is there clean money? Is there perfect money? Are there perfect humans? Not many. Not many.
Oh, come on.
However,
really?
here's the thing. Number one is, when you know you have enough, what's the rest of the legacy that you want to do? If you want to make more money, what are you going to do with it? A lot of people say, I'll give it away when I make a lot. When is that?
Right.
And how much do you give away? And there's a lot of things, if you're interested, I'll go further down that topic. But right now, just say, I had to conclude something. Every model was, I've got to be a billionaire, I'm not really relevant.
Right.
We don't get Gandhi and Martin Luther King as our models of or Mother Teresa. We talk about them, but those aren't what we're driven to
Well,
want
that's
to
the
be.
shift. Don't you think that's the shift? I mean, you talked about the 60s.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit younger than that, but not much. But I was incredibly influenced by Martin Luther King. That's why I became a speaker. But Martin Luther King was not a wealthy man. He was influenced by Gandhi, as you said, not a wealthy person.
Right.
I look at people like Oprah, who is incredibly wealthy but didn't start off that way.
That's right.
These are people driven by a purpose, which
That's
you and
right.
I are very much aligned with, being driven by a purpose. But I hear the same argument you do, which is, I've got to put the profits first. Purpose is lovely. I like the idea.
Yeah.
But if we don't make money, we're out of business. If we don't make money, we can't give. So we have to be in business in order to make money, in order to give.
Yeah.
How do you counter that argument? Because it's quite sort of blockheaded.
Of the 6 or 7 points I'd like to make, I'll just have to pick a few.
Sure.
Number one, I came up with the concept that when I had enough money, that I would still enjoy capitalism and building businesses. That's wonderful. It's creative. It does all kinds of good things in the world. But that my real goal would be to be a billionaire of good deeds, and even more, a billionaire of love. I want happiness. I want to have contributed. I want to have a good life. I think a lot of people get a lot of money and they're not very happy. But
That's for sure.
Maybe some of them are. I'm sure there's some that are. So there's one
You
point.
and I have both worked with, dealt with, and interacted with people who've got more money than they could possibly know what to do with, and they're all ready to slash their wrists. Not in the world, don't get me wrong, most people don't know that about
That's
them.
right.
We know that because we have private relationships
That's
with
right.
them. But many of them are very miserable.
How their marriage is, how's their relationship with their kids, how's their health, these kinds of things. Second is that this is the biggest money-making opportunity in history.
And I want to stop there for a minute because I want
All right.
people to get that. So we're talking about clean money, we're talking about contributing, we're talking about making a difference, we're going all those kinds of things. And that was one of the things that went, oh, that is the piece we got to go to. That this clean money idea is the greatest money-making opportunity of our time. Tell us about that.
Here's why.
Yeah.
We have reached our limits. Ecologically, in terms of pushing divide of wealth on the planet, and in many other ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was born with 3 billion people. There's 7.5 now. That is in one lifetime.
Yeah.
There will be 10 billion when some listeners are still alive. How are we going to have a planet with 10 billion people, shifting climate, killing species, ocean acidification? The list goes on and on.
Sure.
So all of this came from good intention. We came from humbler backgrounds. We put our ingenuity to work and we invented all kinds of great things.
Yeah.
Now we're finding out that there's some side effects of that and that we have to do it differently. So in order to reinvent transportation systems, the built environment, energy systems, food systems, soil protection, all of this is going to take another wave of massive ingenuity, and people are already and will make lots of money doing this. There are lots of examples out there. So
Elon Musk, Tesla is a great
Tesla
example, right?
and Elon Musk and many, many people. And depending on, you know, everybody's going to make their own value judgment about what's good, what's bad, what helps the future. I'm daunted by artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency and blockchain and all these things and what that's really going to mean to the future. But I'm going to have to bet on it and hope for it. Not necessarily, I don't understand it enough to be an investor there, but I get it. So I've made my career about investing in things I could understand. It started with a health diagnosis when I was told I could die soon, I could live long, and there was nothing I could do about it. So it was a kidney disease, a family genetic kidney disease. And I thought about what helps the kidney. Well, the kidney filters toxins from the blood. Well, how many toxins do I want to put in and work my kidney how hard? And so I came up with the idea that clean blood and clean money actually had a connection. If I devoted my money and my business activities towards things that improved, let's say, food systems, healthy food, and all the other topics that I just mentioned, that I could have my cake and eat it too. I could have my tofu and eat it too. And
And you
that
can have your kidneys and use them too.
and I could have my kidneys. And so my kidneys lasted until 10 years ago. A friend ended up giving me her kidney. I was the benefit of modern medicine genius, which is a miracle. But in the process of that, I learned about the organic food industry and the health food industry. And when I first went into my first store, it was kind of unsettling and weird, and I didn't know what any of the stuff was. But gradually I learned. And I figured out that I wanted to help my own health, and I wanted to invest in those products. Well, the investment opportunity at that time was huge. It was considered flaky and weird, and almost no one invested in organic foods. Today, it's a booming industry. It's growing like crazy. Fortunes are being made.
Of course.
And it's not 10% of the North American food dollar yet, and it's probably 1% globally. Mm-hmm. Tell me what's going to happen in that industry over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by the short-sightedness of leaders who are looking back at history to make wealth rather than looking forward. I mean, you know, I'll give you a good example, and I'd love to have your input on it. I was reading recently that Russia has banned chemicals in their wheat. And the reason for that is not because they give a crap, but because they went, oh, the rest of the world is going to want organic wheat that is not polluted and is not GMO'd. So they've banned it because it's a great profit source, not because they are on the bandwagon of health. And, you know, we know that that's not the case.
Let's take fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Precious, hugely important resource that hopefully we'll still have in 1,000 years. The telephone, the camera, probably things that are keeping me alive, the syringes that take my blood tests, all this kind of thing. I want fossil fuels to be around for 500 years. Mm-hmm. Burning fossil fuels to move vehicles around and to heat buildings is no longer necessary.
No.
We have other technologies. You build the infrastructure for renewables, and then this energy source is free.
Yeah.
So that logic is unstoppable. Mm-hmm. I have friends that started some of the early rooftop solar companies. They're now over $1 billion in assets and sales, and these things are skyrocketing. So smart money, including fossil fuels, is buying into these industries because they can see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that there's a real need for us to grasp that. I mean, think that when people think of fossil fuels, they think of gas going into your car, right? But that, as you just said, is one thing only. Everything that you see around you that is plastic, it comes from a fossil fuel. That's changing because we're finding new ways to manufacture. But we are so reliant on fossil fuels beyond putting gas in our car that we need to actually, if there is running out, we need to pull back so that we have it for the other things that we need to manufacture.
I'm all about soft landings. And I think that civilization needs a soft landing because I think we're in a challenge point, and we've got to get smart enough to be sure that things go okay. Soft landing. So industries that are going to change, they need a soft landing. There's a lot of jobs involved. There's lots of economic investment that needs to be repurposed. But we have to start making those changes because we know the damage that we're doing not making those changes. So you can look at this across sectors. The built environment, I believe, is the largest contributor to greenhouse gases because of inefficiency in buildings.
Right.
It will take so many jobs, and these are not robotic jobs. These are people going into buildings and putting in insulation and changing out windows and things like that. Huge job creation, huge money to be made. We're invested in a company out in Langley that makes fiberglass doors and windows. Cannot keep up with production. Fiberglass is way ahead of aluminum and vinyl in retaining heat. We will reach a time where wasting heat, because we don't have good enough insulation, will just be considered crazy.
Right.
So this company cannot keep up with production. They just built a new plant. Regulations will gradually start pushing for better standards. And so you can find examples like this pretty much across every sector.
So going back a little bit, when you talked about, for many of my viewers and listeners, they know about my fall. They know that in 1990 I fell off a mountain and got smashed to pieces. Right. And I've often said that we think that life is changed at that point, but I don't believe that for a moment. I think those dramatic moments are what I call pivotal moments, but real change actually happens later when things can become normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, I mean, you probably met them too. I met people who had a heart attack and they're in the hospital and they've had a triple bypass and yep, my life has got to change. And then you meet them 9 months later when they're actually up and about again and they're right back doing the things they were doing before, even though they swore change before, because things don't change in a pivotal crisis moment. They change later in a conscious choice. Yeah. So there's a pivotal point, pivotal choice, and then there's a conscious choice. That's a distinction. Obviously, being diagnosed, because your life was over as far as it was, like you had a very short...
Felt that way.
But you had a very short lifespan left if you didn't get help, right?
Yeah.
And then a friend stepped up, donated a kidney, you were able to live. Was that a pivotal moment, or was that a choice moment? And if it was, how was it?
Well, it was pivotal. As we've already talked over, I started before that, but because of the diagnosis, so I was already on this pathway. But what happened when I had to use email and send out, I sent out about 500 emails to people that I told them I was going to die and I needed a kidney. And it was a 13-year wait on dialysis in order to go through the system here. So it was get a kidney from a living donor or I have to wait. And that was a huge moment just in itself because it caused me, for one of the first times, to truly ask for help in a very vulnerable and humble way.
Right.
It was like, without that, I'm in serious trouble. So that was number one. Second was, I wake up from kidney transplant and I'm here and I look around and everything's going on and I get up out of the bed and within 5 days they got me out of the hospital and I'm walking around the seawall here. And so much came together for me about what I said about what's your legacy? If I died then, what had I done with my life? And my real point here is to challenge every one of us to think about what our money is doing right this minute to people and places around the world. Are we okay with that? Are we proud to tell our children? Are we okay if we might be poisoning other people's babies, starting wars, and doing damage to a lot of parts of the world that we consider precious? In fact, a Garden of Eden. How can we pollute and poison the Garden of Eden and feel okay? So there's a way to make these changes. There's a way to pass on this kind of understanding to next generations. And next generations and future people will be looking back at this era. This is the era when our capacity to do damage, those of us alive today, are happening when science and technology can do damage at a vast scale that did not exist before. So our maturity, our emotional and psychological maturity as the human race is what's needing to catch up.
Absolutely. But the challenge is, as you well know, the challenge is that it's not real unless it affects me. That's the way, the psychology of human beings. And so, you know, we've all heard the story of the Republican congressman or whatever it might be, who is, you know, very much anti-gay, blah, blah, blah. Then his son comes out as gay and suddenly he's changed his mind.
Sure.
It's not, and I'm not judging that guy. I'm just making a point that nothing is real until it impacts us. The analogy I like to give is that we've all been flicking through the channels back when we used to do it that way, on a Sunday, a rainy Sunday, and we come across the Africa picture and the kid with the flies on its face and the swollen belly, and we go, oh, that's so sad, and we change channel. We flick past it, we never do anything about it.
Right.
And even if we hang around, we might donate $30 a month to that. But if I was to able to come and transport you instantaneously to Africa, to that village, with those kids, you'd run home and scream at everybody, what the hell are you doing? We got to help these people. So how do we make it real for people, Joel? This is my point, because I get where you're coming from. We have to create a legacy. We have to have our own purpose. We have to be willing to even take account for the impact we're having on people's lives who don't know our name and multiple generations. And even though you and I can be very passionate about these things, it's not real. How do we get it to be real for them?
My premise is this. Many trends have come through society and things end up changing dramatically. Some are early adopters, some are late adopters, some are dinosaurs.
Absolutely.
Industries, big industries, huge companies rise and fall in a not very long period.
Well, certainly of late, many of them have disappeared in the last 15 years.
Okay, so here's an early warning, early tip, hot tip for those who want to listen. Especially younger people.
Right.
Go into careers in finance, create products for people like myself who want our money aligned with what we believe in as people. That is growing like this.
Right.
Other things are too. So just consider it and think about what you want to do with your life. Almost anything that companies may currently be doing can be done better.
Right.
So it's an economic opportunity, it's a find your place in heaven opportunity, it's a way to be respected in the future and have your kids proud of you, and it's a great opportunity to have a successful business. So you will either pay attention now, or you won't, and you may do well, or you may do well either way. But there is an opportunity that is emerging that is unstoppable.
So I think that because there's a Republican-Democrat argument, and the Republicans say that their argument is about effectiveness and efficiency, and the Democrats say that it's a moral argument. But it seems to me that what you're talking about here is actually both. It's saying you need to morally be centered, but still make money, do great things.
I don't think that pushing tax burden more and more to people who have the least money and taking the benefits for those of us that have the most has a good outcome down the road. If we put too much pressure on the masses and make their lives miserable,
The revolution.
we're going to be dealing with challenges that we may not be able to contemplate right now. That cycle goes through history. There is a balance. If you don't stay balanced about it and really take care of the whole system, you're begging for trouble.
But okay, so now we're on a different subject, and I think it's an important one, and that subject is what is viewed by many as a socialist mentality. Now, you and I know it's not socialist.
What does that word mean?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, like they called Obama a socialist, and I was like, you obviously don't know what socialism is. And I think that Bernie's demise was he used the word, which is a swear word in the United States, as opposed to saying he's a leftist Democrat.
Yeah.
But that understanding, so we've got the new tax laws in the United States as we record this, regarding the wealthy are getting more, whilst President Trump is saying it's good for the poor. People know it's not, but the fact still remains, I've looked at the numbers, and I'm sure you have too, that if they raise the taxes enormously on the wealthy, it's still not going to cover the deficit. But I think the other side of the argument, and it's shown, those numbers are there, but the other side of the argument is it's not going to cover the deficit if you financially cripple people who've got no money anyway.
It's fundamentalism at work.
Right.
And it's amazing how intelligent people can use such simplistic thinking. But I don't think it's honest, a lot of it.
Right.
I just don't think it's honest. I think that we've developed our views about, we've developed a bit of let's put it, here's how I say it. The biggest religion on the planet right now is making maximum money.
Absolutely.
So
The God of
we
money.
need a spiritual evolution to create a money revolution, which just simply balances things better and thinks about the long term. Our job is as ancestors of the future, and we are the only ones that are going to think about the long term, other than government, which the same people we're talking about that want to exploit government for their own benefits constantly demonize and attack. If we don't have an arbiter of the commons and who's looking out for the larger public good, and we expect that rapacious people who are driven to have maximum amounts of money that they own without clarity about why, that's not a good formula either.
No.
So I just say use your common sense.
But common sense is extraordinarily rare.
Okay.
Because people are biased and people have been conditioned and trained. I mean, let's look at this. You know this one. There's a title.
Yeah.
And the title is Citizens United, which is a way, the propaganda said, this is a way to make sure that everybody is treated equally in the voting.
Including corporations are people.
Including corporations are people. So we've gone from a government of the people, by the people, for the people, to a government of the corporation, by the corporation, for the corporation. But this is, when I'm talking about common sense, it is very often the working class and even the lower middle class who vote these things in, who do not stand up against the people who represent them and say, yeah, sure, go ahead. This is mind-boggling. And the reason I'm bringing it up here is, obviously I'm passionate about it, but on top of that, you are from an immigrant family, brought up in the South, which would have been surrounded by that kind of mentality.
Yes.
I want to have a little bit of an insight from what it was like in that world, because that's the breeding ground of this rare common sense, which is where people are voting against their own good.
What can I share with you?
Well, I want to, when you look at things like Citizens United and the forces behind those things, which are wealth, because for me, it's again part of your title, it's not just about money, it's about power.
Yeah.
And I think that is the distinction that most people don't understand, is, many of the people with a ton of money get it, so they give a ton away. Warren Buffett, whoever it might be, are giving lots and lots of money away. But there are people who are driven, who will remain nameless, who are driven for money, for purely the game of power. How do we get the person who is voting against their own greater good to be able to see through the media that's created? How do we get them to see about you're voting against yourself?
Unfortunately, we have been through a period of several decades of systematic dumbing down of the population and of tearing apart the fibers of what holds together the public sector. So we are in a mess, and you're making the point very well. I can't give the comprehensive solution to all that, but education helps a lot. Paul Hawken is a colleague, but a multi-times author who had a lot of influence on me with his books. His latest one is called Drawdown. He's mapped out 100 top solutions for how to change the climate direction that's going on right now. He goes through and analyzes all of it. The top solution is investment in women and children around the world. Why? Because if we get better education, if we get better caring of kids, they grow up with better values, then we have a chance that these challenges you're talking about will change. Are humans capable of actually reaching some kind of enlightenment, of some kind of spiritual evolution where we take responsibility for these things and don't come up with all kinds of pretty nutty arguments, and the future is going to look on it that way, but pretty nutty arguments about why exploiting everything as fast and hard as we can so we can pile up dollars is actually not going to end up in a good result. I don't know. Right. It's a challenge. That's why I've written a book. That's why I'm hanging myself out here saying these things. I try to be as nice about it as I can, and I feel like there's room for everyone to make incremental advances.
Sure.
We're just not going to change overnight, but the risk is that we face horrific outcomes. And those horrific outcomes, okay, everybody's building their survivalist place, the people with a lot of money,
sure,
investing millions and millions of dollars of storing weapons and food and bunkers and all this kind of thing. So is that the outcome? Do we feel good about that? What's that world going to be like? So we've got our bunker. We get to, are there television channels? We'll have videos, I guess. We'll be able to look at old movies. What are we going to do out there in our bunkers? Wait till everything settles and then go back and rebuild civilization?
And start the game again? Yeah, it's interesting. You and I are in an age bracket where we can remember Reagan and trickle-down economics, and now we're living in a second the new reincarnation of trickle-down economics, which to me is mind-blowing. But I'm seeing the reincarnation of many things: women's rights being removed and having to fight for them. Don't they have that? Like, was I in a dream? So a lot of those things are re-emerging as challenges.
Yes.
And I remember back in 1988, 89, when I was in the first 5 years of my speaking, talking about this thing around global money and what was going to happen to the transference of wealth. We are now in another phase again, because now we've got the rising millennials, which are the next massive generation boom, coming forward, going to inherit trillions of dollars. You and I do work with multi-generational wealthy families. The transference of wealth, and what I'm loving seeing in millennials is that they do want purpose-driven organizations, and they want to do stuff that is meaningful, and they're not willing, not all, but many of them are not willing to have money for power, but money for the power of making a difference. Are you finding that in the people that you're working with?
Yes. If you talk to wealth managers today, there will be very few that have not been hassled by clients. And it's not only the millennials, but it might be the spouse. They're being asked for something better. They're saying, I don't want that. And they're moving their wealth to other firms. Part of my hope is that this book will be valuable to the wealth managers so they can get the mindset and understand where these values are coming from and actually think about it. So that industry is one of the early to feel it, because I'm not going to put my money in things that I know are destructive and damaging, and many millennials are not going to do that. Maybe they will change. They told me I was going to get conservative when I turned 30. I beat that one, but not everybody does. I was determined to. And it's just different information era, different access to information, et cetera. So wealth management is feeling it. Here, I'll take big food. So big food controlled all the world of food for a long time. They're losing market share. They're losing shelf space. Their growth has decelerated. Organic and niche brands and all the, the kind of all that stuff growing
crazy.
Big food's buying it now as fast as they can.
I see that.
The companies we're invested in are getting purchased by, some are getting purchased by very mission-driven players. We're just making a sale to a family office that is dedicated to the purpose and values of the company they're buying. We recently had one sell that Nestle bought. It's in plant-based foods. Why is Nestle getting into plant-based foods?
Nestle, whose CEO was videoed making a statement that he does not believe that water is a human right and that people should have to buy it.
And I bet
and they own a ton of water in British Columbia, Canada, that the native people of Canada are not allowed to touch.
And I bet he got a lot of pushback.
I'll bet.
And I bet that in their corporate boardrooms, they're wondering why their products are starting to lose ground. All of big food is in this. In the field I'm in, they're swarming. The companies used to have to get to 50 million in sales before they were interesting. Then it was 25 just a couple of years ago. And we're seeing sales under 5 million in sales being bought by multi-billion-dollar companies because they realize they need the thinking, the mindset, and understanding of modern consumers, that all their money and all their focus groups, they don't know how to create the authenticity. So they are buying up the field, and this is happening across sectors.
Right. So this is my question to you, Joel, because you're in that world. Are they buying authentic brands to use as a mask for the corporate beast?
Yes, and they cannot tear apart those brands because they're built on the authenticity and on those issues. If they try, they're going to screw them up.
But a lot of it is still, what my point is, a lot of that, I mean, I was reading about it recently, probably a month ago, and I apologize because I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a very small niche brand that was built on authenticity and caring, you know, and the packaging stayed the same. It was bought by Big Food. Packaging stayed the same, but now we look at the ingredients, and some of the ingredients have changed, and they're not quite so organic, and blah, blah, blah. And these companies are now, you know, that brand is still put out there, marketed in exactly the way it was, locally grown, and but it's faux. It's
okay. There's 7 billion people. There's probably 1 million companies. You're going to get some good actors. You're going to get some bad actors. You're going to get mistakes. You're going to get the whole thing. That is changing. It's harder and harder to tear apart these brands and make them less what they appeared to be and what they are. So soon enough, change takes a long time.
Sure.
Doesn't happen quickly. There's a lot of different moving parts. But what is clear are trend lines. Mm-hmm. Trend lines are moving this direction.
Right. One of the things you said that I found interesting in the book was you talked about that this is a spiritual evolution. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Where did money come from? What is it? What's the meaning of life? If you take time to consider those questions, and you think about your deathbed, and you think about your legacy, do you care about how you're looked at for your integrity, your values, what you contributed in the world, or have you gotten completely ruthless about that and you just don't care? Well, the ones that don't care will be a dying breed, or there'll probably always be people like that. Mm-hmm. But the spiritual evolution is needed because right now we give ourselves permission, and society does, that where my money is invested right this minute, I don't really have to think about, I don't have to answer to anyone about the damage it may be doing in some community somewhere on the planet that I'll never see. Right. Transparency and information is changing that. But what about me changing that? Who do I care about being as a human? What is a good life? And I think that our global religions are letting us down some. Mm-hmm. At their core, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Come to your place of worship on the weekend. Give us your cut. We will give you salvation. Go back out on Monday morning and do whatever you need to do to satisfy yourself. So this is why I think there will be the rise of new spiritual thinking, and some of it will formalize, and maybe it will become next world religions. Who knows how that, but they do change over history.
Absolutely.
So I believe that there are things going on where people are getting together in their living rooms, they're having support groups, they're exploring themselves, they're working on these kinds of issues, and out of that is where the impetus that is really going to make what I'm talking about get very big. The early adopters are now well proven, and if you take some time to consider what you think spirituality is, which I think is how we decide the meaning and purpose of our life, mm-hmm. and then how do you get consistency, and how do you truly align that and not just have it be window dressing?
Right.
A spiritual evolution will come which says, I'm responsible for my money and what it is doing to people and places right this minute.
Now, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because, again, I think that people they create hard lines. You're a money person, you're a spiritual person, or you're a money person, you're a religious person, right? But this is interesting because you're talking about a spiritual revolution, and at the same time you run a venture capital fund that is mission-based. Tell us about the fund and how that aligns with this spiritual revolution.
Yeah. Well, we invest in organic food, skincare, and environmental technologies. Those are inherently areas that we can feel pretty good that we're even in those sectors. Secondly, our first, we call ourselves Mission Venture Capital. That's to give a signal to investors, and we have to live up to it.
Sure.
We're not perfect.
No.
We're making compromises. Everyone is. But our first order of business is to understand the entrepreneurs and why they're doing what they're doing. Do they actually care? Because if they don't, it will end up being a bit of a false dichotomy. They won't know how to handle the kinds of issues that come up that all business people face through time. How will they treat their employees? What happens when conflict happens? What happens when somebody treats them wrong? And those kinds of things. So it's super important for the modern business person to have an understanding of their inner skills,
yes,
their psychology, their emotion, their spirituality. So all of that is the backdrop for the way that we invest. We know we have a couple of hundred investors, not big institutions, people, families, and small and boutique wealth managers. They are demanding to find products like this. So our job is to keep staying ahead, keep pushing further, get into companies that are going another step. Last investment we made is in a tracking mechanism for where food comes from. So that if Chipotle has a bad incident with its poisoning, some customers get poisoned again, they will know instantly exactly where that specific food came from, which farm, which batch, and that kind of thing. So we've got technology genius, we've got all kinds of ways. If we figure out what we want to solve, we can do it. And we're looking for the companies that are the front edge of that and who are striving to keep doing better. There are certifiers, there's metrics out there now, there's an industry growing around how you quantify these things and how you be sure. And those, we invest in those, we take them on ourselves. B Corporation is a really important one right now that has ourselves look at our company and have to go through a 2-year review constantly about a comprehensive set of questions. How we treat people, do we get fined for environmental fines, all this kind of thing. And we strongly encourage our companies to go through that because that gives an outside validation that people will begin to understand over time. So by 10 years from now, we will see tens of thousands of B corporations.
Right.
And they will be committed and they will be looked at more closely, and they're willing to do that because that scrutiny is going to help them meet the emerging marketplace better and make more money.
If I may, I would like to tag into something there because you're using a phrase that I'm familiar with and was made familiar with only 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I know that many of our viewers and listeners have never heard of them. And when I have a conversation with somebody, they're like, what do you mean? Because if it's B, it's less than A. So it's not as good.
Yeah.
And you're talking about B Corp and B Corp certification. Can you tell our viewers, our listeners more about what a B Corp is?
So to Americans, we've got a C corporation, which is your basic corporation. We've got an S corporation, which is a tax management type of corporation. So there's C and S.
Right.
Did I get that right? But that's a C. Right. So the ABC, whatever. That's not really the right measurement.
A corporation, they're at the top of the line.
Yeah, there's no A corp.
Right, so B must be less than that.
That's right. B stands for benefit corporation.
Benefit.
And so a number of states and cities have even made legislation to give modest benefits to people that will be a B corporation because they think they're better for their communities and for the long-term well-being there. So, but what it really is about is this comprehensive review of yourself and your activities that is validated outside. They come in and check on you and that kind of thing. And then you get a rating. So we were able to be a best for the world investment company for several times. They do it every other year. So we've been very blessed with that. And about over half of our portfolio are these B corporations, and numbers of them are best for the world. Well, B Corp is still small. If you get in now, you got a better chance at being best for the world. As it gets bigger and bigger and you're competing against more companies, that'll be harder. But that's just a designation, and it's wonderful to have it. It makes us feel good. The important thing is those questions, which we also often use in due diligence when we're checking out a company. We want to know how the entrepreneurs are. We want to know if they know what they're doing. Can they grow a company? All those kinds of things. We also want to know how will their values stay intact, because we don't want to be embarrassed by their activities. That will defeat our whole purpose and premise. So these are the kinds of tools that we as people need and we as businesses need to help us have a system of metrics and kind of a common language that can happen.
I wonder how deep you inside your fund can go or need to go. And I'll just tell you what I mean. When we're brought into a company, we work with a lot of these companies, and they bring us in because they want to find their purpose. Mm-hmm. Okay? And many of them say, well, I don't even know why we're doing this, because we're already 100 million, we're already making X whatever it is, why do we even need to bother? And I explain the same things. Millennials want to work in places, you want to keep your people loyal.
Keep your employees.
They're not going to stay. Right. So they go, okay, well, we can see the benefit-ish. They're not really bought in. And on the other side is people who very often we find, when I say, well, are you purpose-driven? Yes. What is your purpose? That ain't a purpose. That is a mission statement. Yeah. Versus a deeply emotionally embedded, this is why we get up in the morning, this is what it's not about being the best in service, it's not about being at the cutting edge, it's about something that is far bigger than you. Do you guys really look into the leader or the founder of those organizations at that level, or do you sort of look overall when looking to invest?
We do our best on that.
Right.
I'm the old guy in our company now, so I get to come in at a point and add another screen to checking out those entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Is one of the things that I find really important and I care about deeply. So yes, we want to know their track record. We want to know who they are as people the best we can. We're in a business that's fast-paced. You can't if you don't make a decision fairly soon, you're left out. We do the best that we can, and I would argue that we're among a small number that's growing, sure, who carry this kind of ethic and values, not only because we care, which we do, but there is an economic benefit that's coming and growing, sure, bigger and bigger. So there's the holy alliance, right, is do good, make money.
Right.
Now, how much money? What do you do with the money? As the world evolves, we may see ourselves with a system that balances things a little better. Taxation, public policy, regulations, what you can do and not do as you go out into the landscape, how you can treat people. Those things will help a lot, and I believe they'll happen because I think that dealing with 10 billion people is going to require us to be that smart.
We're getting close to the end of the show, and I want to ask you, what is the one thing that you want our viewer, our listener, the person looking in, what is the one practical thing that you want them to go away and do in the next 24 hours to 7 days? What's the thing that you would like, if you could just inject that into them and they would take action, what would it be?
Hi, everybody. I want you to inventory your holdings, your money, and think about what it is doing right now to people and places. Are you proud of that? Are you willing to share it with your kids? And are you going to will you do something about it? If you've got stock public equities holdings, do you care whether you're in industries that you know are very damaging? Mm-hmm. I ask you to care, and I ask you to look at it. And secondly, the bigger picture is, you are an ancestor. We are ancestors, bloodline or not. We are creating tomorrow's world. Mm-hmm. Are you going to help us have a healthy, generative, positive future, or will you sit by as everything deteriorates and we move into realms that we can't even speculate about now that we wish we didn't give to our grandchildren? They're going to study this period because this is the time where our ability to do damage got out of control from our human capacity as it used to be. We will be judged by what we do in these next few decades. And it's on our shoulders. So I ask you to think about that and consider how you want to feel at your deathbed and what your legacy will be.
So what do you hope your legacy will be?
Billionaire of good deeds. Radical generosity.
That's pretty awesome. Please, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for doing the show. It's been really great having you here. Yeah. Please tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, about the things that you do, and the resources that you have available for people.
Our business is renewalfunds.com, based in Vancouver, BC, Canada. A very good place to be these years. We're some of the luckiest people in the world. Number 2, I have a website, joelsolomon.org, where I've got a lot about the book and blogs and references and all kinds of other resources. And I will continue building that. And I would love to hear from you and what you think about what I have to say.
So thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I really want you, as always, to not listen or watch this in the background, but really challenge you to go back, listen again. I know we all are busy and we got lots going on, but take the time to go back, listen again, take some notes, and really sort of outline 3 things that really hit home for you and 3 actions that you could take in the next 24 hours to 7 days that will start moving you in this direction. This gentleman has shared his valuable time, his energy, his effort. Obviously, this is a very successful individual who has who's been radically generous with his time here so that each of us can grow and develop too. So I challenge you to do just that. And again, go over to Joel's website. It's his name, Joel Solomon. As he said, Solomon with all O's, joelsolomon.com. And also you can get over to renewalfunds.com as well. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to remind you that some of the largest companies in the world today are facing what is a counterintuitive problem in that they are growing at enormously fast rates, and they're bringing on some of the greatest people possible, but they're losing those people at an incredibly fast speed. In fact, before they can even get their ROI on the training and development for those people. If you want to learn how to tap into the hidden resources for loyalty within inside of your organization by tapping into purpose, then reach out to us at fullmontyleadership.com. fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com, saying stay curious, my friend, stay curious about where you are investing. Are you investing in the future of a world you'll be proud of, or investing in the destruction of the planet that we live on? Till next time, Dov Baron, I'm out.